Order, order. Welcome. Good morning, everybody, to the HS2 Select Committee. We continue today hearing petitions, the first of which is Janet Moore, represented by you, Mr. Watson.
Correct.
Right. We have up a map. Would you like to kick off?
Absolutely. Yes, good morning, gentlemen. I'm Jeremy Watson, a rural chartered surveyor with Howkins and Harrison, and I am the agent for Mrs. Janet Moore, who owns...
We met at Southam, didn't we? We met at Southam in the car park.
We did, yes. Janet Moore, who owns Starbold Farm and Hart Farm at Southam. Hart Farm extends to 161 acres and was purchased by Brian and Janet Moore in approximately 1972. And a year later, they purchased Starbold Farm, which is some 254 acres, thereby providing them with a total farming block of 415 acres, which is on the screen in front of you. Brian Moore unfortunately died in the summer of 2013, and Mrs. Moore now runs the holding as a sole trader. It is an interesting holding because not only is there a significant block of commercial arable land, but there are 5 residential let houses and 15 commercial business operators working out of Starbold Farm.
You say it's interruption, Mr. Watson. The second holding that they bought, was it one to the left or one to the right?
On the left.
One on the left. So
Harp is on the right and Starbold on the left.
Yeah. So although it's coincidental, I mean it's interesting that HS2 basically slices
through both.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
Plan 1, which I slide 1, shows Hart Farm with the existing access marked in green, providing direct access onto the A423, which is the Banbury Road. Mrs. Moore also owns the land, the rectangle of land immediately north of the green line, in fact, and that is currently a commercial garden and nursery centre, which unfortunately is going to be lost to HS2. So she actually has a lot of road frontage. Our petition was submitted in May last year, objecting to the fact that Hart Farm was going to be cut off from the public highway by the proposed railway line, and that HS2 proposed an accommodation access to the land, with this access being taken over the neighbour's property. We had requested that either an access bridge was constructed, or alternatively that the accommodation access track be transferred into the ownership of the petitioner. As I've mentioned, Hart Farm is 161 acres and Starbold 254. The whole area of 415 acres is run as a single commercial unit in arable cropping, with a mixture of wheat, oilseed rape and winter beans planted on the land. Grain storage is provided at Starbold Farm, and the whole unit is run with large and modern machinery that's able to cope with all the arable operations on a timely basis. Slide 1 that we're looking at helps to identify some of the factors here. Hart Farm is edged in red. The solid black line represents the route of HS2. The blue line represents the realigned Banbury Road A423, and the yellow line is the proposed accommodation access track to be granted to Hart Farm, with the green being the existing access. Notwithstanding the significant impact of HS2 on Mrs. Moore's business, this petition specifically addresses the accommodation access track only, which is between points A and B on slide number 2. There we go. This plan shows the proposed accommodation access, which is to be provided by HS2. Section A to B, which is marked in red, is on land owned by an adjacent landowner, and section B to C is on land owned by Mrs. Moore. At meetings held this month with HS2, they confirmed that the current proposal is that the section A to B will remain in the ownership of HS2, and the petitioner will only be granted a right of access along this track. In fact, I subsequently discovered today that possibly section B to C will also not be in our ownership, and we will only be granted a right of access. We believe that the current offer for the accommodation access is inadequate, and what we propose is one of two things. Either that the access track AB, once constructed, is transferred to the ownership of Mrs. Moore. Transferring this to her ownership will grant exclusive occupation of the track to the petitioner and her staff. Extremely large and fast-moving agricultural machinery will be able to use the track in the certain knowledge that there are no other users on the road. This should ensure no accidents, and from a health and safety point of view is of paramount importance.
Have HS2 explained to the petitioner why they need to retain ownership of that access?
Because we can fence it off, we can make sure there are no other users on it. It is just an issue of, there's two issues, there's a financial issue and there's a safety issue.
No, the question is, have HS2 explained why they want to retain ownership?
Not in any significant detail at all. I had more discussion in the last 10 minutes before we came in the room than I've had before, and that was quite short notice. The second alternative is that the track AB and the adjoining landscape mitigation area, which is hatched in orange, should be transferred to the ownership of the petitioner. At the meeting we had with HS2 on the 3rd of February, they agreed that our request was reasonable, but that such a transfer of the access track might make access difficult to the landscape mitigation planting area. If the committee feel this is reasonable, then we would ask that the landscape mitigation planting area is also transferred to the ownership of Mrs. Moore, and that she will undertake to carry out any reasonable management of that land thereafter. We've already accepted that an accommodation bridge over the line is cost prohibitive, but we really do request ownership of the access track. Our proposals are practical solutions to a practical issue. Modern farm machinery is large and travels at high speed, and it is essential from both a business and health and safety point of view that the accommodation access track is only used by one farming business. The petitioner's proposals are based on practicality and have a number of advantages. It should eliminate any risk of accidents occurring. It will certainly eliminate any neighbour disputes over track maintenance. It will reduce the claim for injurious affection on the severed land at Hart Farm. Land values will be considerably reduced if this land is accessed only by a right-of-way rather than with direct road frontage that we own. Our proposal adds no cost to the HS2 project, as the accommodation track between A and B has to be acquired from the current landowner in any event. And the adjoining landowner is in no way inconvenienced, as he will retain his existing field gateway, which is completely unaffected by this HS2 proposal, as identified on the photograph on slide 3. You can see that the access track that's proposed at point A is quite a long way from a double 20-foot gateway to the existing owner. To conclude, last Friday night we did receive a letter of assurance from HS2 in which they stated that the Secretary of State will require the nominated undertaker to engage with the landowner of Starbold Farm regarding future ownership and access rights over the land in the parish of Southam. Now, you must forgive our lack of faith in merely engaging with the undertaker, because that's what we've already been doing, and we would be hoping that the committee would support our suggestion that on completion of the project the access track is handed over to the petitioner. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Watson, for being brief. Mr. Knoll.
Can I put up, please, P4887? Just want to explain. This is really, in part, in answer to Mr. Mearns' question. we've superimposed on this plan the two farm holdings, Starbold to the south and rather to the west, and Park Farm to the east. Now, you can see the access track. If we can just move the arrow, there we are. There's the access track that we're talking about. And there are, as well as serving Park Farm, there is a field which I'm just showing you now, which is within the ownership of Mr. Postlethwaite, and that field, as you can see, will be severed by the railway, and we want to keep open for now the option of the access track serving not only Mrs. Moore's land, but also that severed field which is owned by Mr. Postlethwaite. We also have, if I can just take the cursor back to the road, as has been pointed out to you, there's a further holding to the northeast of Park Farm, over which we need to run the access track, and we need to take land from that holding for that purpose. And although there is an existing field gate, as you were shown a moment ago, straight onto the main road serving that plant, that holding, there is the construction of the new access track to serve, amongst others, Park Farm, will be relatively close, as you saw on the photograph, to that existing field gate, and we will need to be able to take account of any concerns that the Highway Authority may have about having two, instead of one, private field and farm access in relatively close proximity onto a primary road. So there are a number of factors here that need to be resolved, in addition to the question of ownership of the access track, and those need to be resolved before a final decision can be made about the question of ownership, because if we need to provide access rights to Mr. Postlethwaite and possibly access rights to the farmer to the north, that's the Griffith Charitable Trust, then they will need to be taken into account in any decision about who should own the track in question. What I can say, without any qualification, is that whatever is the outcome of consideration of transfer of title, if that occurs, to that access track, is that Mrs. Moore will enjoy full vehicular rights of way, at the very minimum, over that access road, and that she will enjoy them on a freehold basis. In other words, she will have a right of way for all purposes over that road as a minimum, coextensive with her freehold ownership of the farm which that access will, the farm holding Park Farm which that access will serve. That means, in practical terms,
Mr. Mole, you mentioned that she'll have the freehold ownership of the access track.
She'll have a freehold right of way.
Freehold right of way.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, obviously, part of it goes through her land, but the top bit goes through, as you mentioned, the charitable trust's land.
Yeah.
And so that obviously wouldn't. She'd have a vehicular. She'd have a full set of rights along that stretch.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what she probably is going to be concerned about, and that was alluded to by Mr. Watson, is that there are quite often confusions about these rights of way, particularly when they become either byways or, more general rights of way. And as he pointed out, with farm machinery using this route on a regular basis, what they don't want is for it to become a general public right of way. So how do we stop that happening?
Absolutely no question of that. This is not intended to be a track over which public rights will be granted. The most that Mrs. Moore may expect to do is to share the use of that track with two other farmers. Mm-hmm. That's the most that she may expect to do. There's no question of public rights being granted here. It's a private accommodation track. The issue before you is whether she should now be told, without qualification, that she will have not simply, for all practical purposes, an unlimited right of way over that track for all her farming needs, but whether she should be given, whether she should be sold the land over which that right of way passes, And as I've said, the difficulty with that is that she's not the only person who we may need to accommodate in relation to that track. We can't, if we say to her, yes, you can, or if the committee says to her, yes, you can have now exclusive ownership of that track, what are we going to do if the highway authorities say, we want the existing field access onto the A421 to be closed up because we're not prepared to have two farm accesses within 100 or 200 yards of each other onto the A423 Banbury Road? If that is the view that the Highway Authority take, then Mr and Mrs Griffiths will find themselves without access onto that road. Well, that is surely not an acceptable situation. And Mr Postlethwaite may find that he can't get access to his severed field, and so a perfectly good field will be unusable by him, and we will have to then consider taking that into public ownership. I mean, this is the reality of the situation.
I mean, if you forgive me, Mr Moore, I mean, the area which is left to the kind of north of the proposed lane, which is in Mr Postlethwaite's ownership. Yeah. So you get a little irregular feature where the cursor is at the moment. I mean, what's the acreage of that? It seems a relatively small package of land, and I'm kind of wondering here whether we can get the different people who are in the arrangement together to look at some form of land swap or land arrangement, because otherwise you're talking about a very small package of land to be accessed via the new access route, when possibly an accommodation between the different landowners and the HS2 could be brokered to modify a proper solution.
That's exactly the sort of thing that we will be able to broker if we proceed for now on the basis that I've just explained to you. What will stymie and what will tend to cause unnecessary conflict and disagreement, as opposed to brokering consensus and a solution that is acceptable to all, is if we say now, yes, Mrs Moore shall have the freehold and the exclusive right to use that access track come what may. Because Mr Postlethwaite will feel, well, I'm being excluded from the negotiating table.
See, I think the problem that I have is that we're kind of being asked to adjudicate on a range of potential hypotheticals, really, because we don't know if we can actually get the different partners around the table to come to some such agreement. So therefore, from that perspective, I'm wondering whether it's time to actually just say, look, stand back, see if we can get an agreement, and then come back if no agreement is possible.
Well, if I may say so, on this occasion, I may even say that we've anticipated you, because I'm just putting up the letter we wrote to Mr Watson on the 18th of this month. And you'll see that although he was dismissive of what we said we would do, essentially the undertaking, the assurance that we've given, allows that to happen. We'll engage with the landowner of Starbolt Farm regarding future ownership and access rights over this way, and as part of that process, of course, we can deal with the need to how we address those other interests that I have mentioned to you during the course of my response. So we're ready, willing and able to do that. So, we don't think it's helped by this shot across the bows before you today.
Well, theoretically, though, if, for instance, there was to be an agreement between the landowners, that, for instance, the little piece of land owned by Mr Postlethwaite to the northern line were to be involved in some sort of land swap, would there be then any reason why HS2 would need to retain the ownership rights of the access track?
There would be less reason, but we'd still have to consider the landowner to the north, over whose land this access track in part is going to be created. Correct. Because he's going to have land acquired from him compulsorily.
But am I right in thinking that we've now got grounds for negotiation?
We have. We have had before today. That was what the letter was saying we should do.
Sell the land to Mrs Moore, and easements written into the contract, into the freehold sale, allowing limited people access. So she has gives them more confidence because she owns the land, but the easements would be which a lot of people have easements on allowing other people through their land, don't they? I mean, it's very common on farms and even larger houses.
It may well be possible to do that, and that would be something that we anticipated discussing further, but we can't deal with that question in isolation of the other interests that we have just mentioned. And I think it's important to bear in mind, the charitable trust actually own presently part of the land over which this right of way is going to, this road is going to be created. So they may say, well, before you start agreeing to sell our land on to somebody else, perhaps we could have a say in the matter. I think, if I may say so, there's ample room for finding a mutually acceptable solution here, but it's not going to be assisted by a decision being made now peremptorily and prematurely about one of the interests which we're dealing with, and that's all I'm saying to you today.
I absolutely accept that, Mr. Mulder. It's important to get this right. Just one point that Mr. Watson made earlier. Mr. Watson, and this is something that I have, as you know, mentioned before, and without trying to be overcritical, but Mr. Watson did say that there hadn't been the sort of full and constructive negotiation hitherto. And he mentioned that he had done more outside the committee door this morning than he had in the previous weeks. And I do find that a bit disappointing.
He had a meeting, as he said, on the 4th and the 3rd, I think, of February, at which these points were gone through. It was followed up by the letter. The reality is, if I may say so, this is a classic example of one of those situations where Mr. Watson's client, as he's explained to you today, takes a different view about what should happen now than we do. So all the talking in the world hitherto wouldn't have reached, I think, a resolution. But I think what's been helpful for today, certainly so far as we're concerned, is that through as always, the good offices of the committee, we have, I think, a way forward. I would hope, whereby we can take a focused approach to negotiation, including not only this particular petitioner, but also others who I've explained are affected by this, with a view, as Mr. Meehan says, and I'm sure he speaks for the committee in this respect, trying to find a indeed Mr. Thornton, trying to find a mutually acceptable solution, but not just between ourselves and this petitioner, but with the other people that I've mentioned are an interest in this matter, not least the existing landowner. But the key point is that what will come out of this, on any view, what will come out of this is that Mrs. Moore knows now she will have an unlimited vehicular access, physical access, to serve her holding. That is what is shown on the plan, and that is what it is for. The question of who owns it and the relationship of rights and so forth is to be resolved. But that won't compromise the fact that she will have an unlimited right of way to serve her farm.
And we've already established, though, that if the land ownership issues on either side of the lane could be resolved, by a sort of brokerage done by HS2 with the relevant landowners, that it may well be that HS2's requirement to continue with ownership of the access track is diminished.
And it may well be that the outcome will be that she will also have exclusive use of that, which I know is of interest to you, is something she would like. But we can't guarantee that at the moment for the reasons I've given.
But we've got a basis for negotiation.
Basis for negotiation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, Mr. Watson, I'm terribly sorry we've been cutting across here.
So you're going to go away, Mr. Mould, sit down with the landowners, have a further discussion, report back to the committee.
Yeah.
Any final comments, Mr. Watson?
No, that was probably the best session of negotiation we've had so far.
I mean, it looks like no doubt there is a solution, maybe a better solution than there is at the moment. But let's hope. Anyway, you'll report back in due course, Mr. Mould. Thank you very much, Mr. Watson. All right, we now move to Brackley Town Council, who I understand also are representing Global Mapping Limited as well. Here bright and early.
So what's up with that one?
They're not here at the moment, but
They pissed off.
Okay. Welcome. We have Brackley up on the screen. I must admit, until we stopped that day at the petrol station, I generally have driven past Brackley on the way to places like Newark, sort of for fun days out. Who do you want to kick off, Mrs. Carter?
Thank you, and good morning. We had originally anticipated good afternoon, but these things change. I'm Linda Carter. I'm the clerk to Brackley Town Council, and this is Councillor Mark Morell, and we're both authorised to represent the Town Council in this arena. We've also been asked, as you're aware, to represent the views of Alan Smith of Global Mapping. That's, I think, petition 456. He's unable to attend. I've worked in this sector for 20 years, frequently dealing with Section 106 of negotiations and land issues, so I have a reasonable amount of experience. I wonder if we could begin by looking at the fly-through, the section from Radston through to Weston. As I say, you can see there it comes underneath the newly elevated. Or are we in Radston now?
Yeah.
We're still in Radston, sorry.
See the traffic.
Sorry, I haven't seen it before.
Do you want me to speak to you?
Please, yes.
Yeah. So we're coming past Mr. Murray Brown's field on the left-hand side. Brackley is coming into view on the right. We are about to come to the A43, I think. Yeah, so stop here if we can, thanks. Now, the existing A43 trunk road is now, the line is being pointed out to you with the cursor just beyond the new road. So that's part of the existing, that's the Brackley to Northampton road. And then, as you can see, part of the bill works involves realigning that road just to the north on the section that we see being pointed out now. You can't really see it from this aerial, but the effect of that is to take the road slightly up the hill. There's a shallow incline here, so the road comes on this more northerly alignment. It comes up the hill a little. What you can't see off to the right are the areas of land to the north and east of Brackley, which are in the process, I think, of being developed. There is effectively a town extension in planning.
Could you also just point out where the compound will be as well?
I can. I'm just going to complete that point about the planning. That relatively major development, which is taking place in the coming years, is sort of off to where the cursor is to the right. Now, there's a compound to serve the construction of the new the realigned road, which is planned to be just in this corner to the northeast of the line of the new road, and that's shown on the plan. Now, as we go down the route...
Can we just pull back out a minute, please? Back the way that we've come on that route. I'm sorry, I'm just... The new developments are actually... Can you see the brown field to your right? To the right of the line.
They've jumped back to Redstone. That's
fine. No, we're not. This is the A43. Mm-hmm. Where this brown field is where the cursor is.
Yes.
That, just beyond that brown field is where the new developments are.
It's
not on the other side of the A43.
But it extends around, it wraps around, doesn't it?
No, it's all on this side of the A43.
I know. It goes off to the right. You can see.
Yeah, it's to the right, but it's not the other side of the A43.
I think we're agreeing with each other. We're just using different language.
We clarified that through our presentation, I think.
Thank you.
The video fly-through really was why the reason we asked for it, having visited HS2 kindly arranged for me to see it, is you see the road traffic going along the current level of the A43. And the stark difference is the road elevation that may be slight, but could be up to 8 metres high and several metres nearer the town, without the protection of the deep cut-in and tree line that we currently got. So you can see the start of the lorry routes on the video footage from the helicopter shot. Okay. But that's really just to give you an essence of showing the differences. That's all we really wanted to show that for.
Do you want me to carry on?
No,
with
no, no.
this
I think
or not?
we can dispense with
All
the
right.
fly through that point, because that was our main concern with that one.
On that thing, the road shows absolutely no hedges along it, nothing to interrupt the view or the noise or anything. Is that how it's going to be?
No, it will clearly have appropriate boundary treatment. We're not proposing noise barriers here, but it will certainly not be left as a kind of scar across the...
So the indication we have is that there will be screen planting along the edge, but at the moment that road runs in a 5 metre deep cutting.
I think I better stop talking, because I think the petitioners are keen to get on.
You could lay some nice hedges along it.
You could indeed, but there's not a lot you can do on a viaduct, however. The proposed route doesn't lie within parish boundaries, nor will its operation affect us to any significant level. However, the residents that it may affect don't exist as yet because the houses haven't been built. But that's the direction of development in Brackley. But as this is our only opportunity to influence the process, we believe, unless there are any additions and amendments, there are a number of issues that we raised in our petition and we'd like to address those. Slide 2, I think, just gives you a little bit of information about Brackley. I don't need to read it out to you. You're perfectly capable of reading that. But as you know, it's very close to the boundary of South Northamptonshire. We're close to Oxfordshire and to Buckinghamshire, so we tend to quite often fall between two stools in terms of getting information out. The Highways Agency is significantly involved with this project, but we've had no direct contact with them at all. We can't seem to be able to break through to the Highways Agency. Would you slide 3, please? I'm sure members of the committee who visited last October will recall standing on this very busy junction, watching the traffic go.
Stopped and
This is
met you and the town mayor.
Yeah,
you did indeed.
She sends her apology.
Yes, do send her my kind regards.
Yeah. Okay. So this is where we stood, and as you can see from there, behind that lorry, there's a hill, and that's the hill that we are concerned about. Slide 4. These are the things that we're seeking. I'm sure some of these will be contained somewhere in the depths of the documents that we are constantly being bombarded with. But we'll address those at the end. This is just to lay out our stall at the start. So on slide 5, you've got a list of the issues that we raised in our petition. There were 12 issues. We'd like to address most of them, but some of them very briefly. Okay. Like many petitioners, we understand that our ability to petition against this is predicated on an objection to the bill. So that explains our general position, which was we had to object to the whole thing in order to be able to change anything. So on slide 6, in terms of the promoter's response, on the lack of information, we still maintain that although a lot of the information was available, certainly the memory stick that was sent to me to put on deposit for members of the public had no index, and every document was listed merely by its PDF acronym, alphanumeric code. I took a whole day to go through those to actually put titles to those documents. I don't know whether anybody else got the same, but that's certainly what I had, and it certainly made it extremely difficult. The reason I did that was so that any member of the public coming in could actually find a document. But I think a lot of the detail is being developed even through this process. I think things are changing. Extra information is being made available. The information papers are being updated. But I think that generally petitioners were looking for detail at the start of the process that would give them some understanding of how it would affect them. And that's clearly not available, but understandably so. We welcome the announcement on the Community Fund, which deals with the issue that we raised. Whether the amount in there is enough is for Parliament to decide, but we shall have to wait and see on that one. We also welcome the information that the Forestry Commission, the Woodland Trust and the Tree Council are all involved in determining the planting plans and the future maintenance. And again, we applaud HS2 for that. Limits of deviation, we accept that the limits are standard practice. Our specific concern is related to that overbridge which you've just seen. It's proposed at 5 metres. The road will be 5 metres higher than the existing level. That's the current proposal. But with the limits of deviation, that could be another 3 metres, which could be significant. And as far as the draft code of construction practice, it is, as it says, it's a draft. There's very little detail in there. We think that there are numerous caveats in there which could allow 24-hour working, which we're particularly concerned about if it's deemed to be beneficial, then we may end up with 24-hour working at times, and as I say, that's a real concern for us. But we accept that the local environment management plans may give us that opportunity. Slide 7. These were some of the issues, other issues that were raised, that we are told in the response document will be dealt with by way of local environment management plans. And these are the quotations that obviously came from the draft code of practice. Again, you can read those. What we're struggling to understand is quite how the nominated undertaker will engage with both the local communities and ourselves. All the information I've seen published so far talks about stakeholders. It talks about local authorities. At no point does it mention the town or parish council sector, which technically are not local authorities. And certainly our experience of trying to engage with the Highways Agency, if that's anything to go by, then we're going to be struggling. But as a statutory body, we do represent approximately 13,500 residents, and we would want to be granted a place in the discussions on any of those documents. So we'd like an assurance that this would happen, particularly in the case of discussion with the Highways Agency. We understand that there is a Highways subgroup. I am aware that Northamptonshire County Council are part of that subgroup. However, we have no information. We'd like to know how that's disseminated, or how it is going to be disseminated, given that our significant issues around traffic. Slide 8, please. I'm sure that heading meets with some dread on part of the committee. I understand that it has been done to death. We're not concerned with operational noise. The effect on our residents is yet to be determined by that. But the railway is in a deep cutting and is unlikely to impact greatly. So our main concern are the noise levels and the spread of noise created by the increased elevation of the section of the realigned A43. We've seen that there are plans for planting. I've yet to work out quite how you plant on a viaduct and quite what's going to be done to prevent the noise from that viaduct spreading across to the town as it stands now and to the new developments. We understand that South Northamptonshire has covered this in their submission, and we've received a letter from it, and they've received a letter from HS2 with additional figures previously omitted from the environmental statement, and these refer to a proxy site, number 266177 at John Clare Close. Now, I'd actually like to introduce our witness at this stage, if that's possible. I've got a Mr. Peter Breaker here. I'd be really interested, I'd really appreciate it if he could come forward. Can we switch to the next slide, please? The slide that you can see there is John Clare Close. These are the Brackley properties currently closest to the line. It's just less than a kilometre along the length of that arrow. And that arrow is actually pointing to Mr. Breaker's property. So, Peter, if you could just introduce yourself.
My name is Peter Breaker. I live with my wife at 51 John Clare Close and have done so for 15 years. My wife is retired and I am semi-retired.
I understand, Peter, that you've had some dealings with HS2.
Yes, we were approached by HS2 in 2013. They requested us to provide access onto our property for the purposes of taking pre-construction noise and vibration measurements. We had no objection to this and entered into an HS2 early access agreement for sound and vibration monitoring.
Okay, and did you receive a payment for that, Peter?
We did.
Could you tell the committee what that payment was?
It was approximately, I can't tell you the exact figure.
Okay.
It was, I believe, around about £900.
Okay. So, is it fair to assume that the noise measurements detailed in Volume 5 of the Environmental Statement, and which HS2 are now proposing to use as a proxy for the sawmill site, would include measurements taken at your property?
I would doubt that, because as far as I'm aware, none were taken.
So you are not aware of them ever entering your property to take any measurements at that site?
None whatsoever.
Are you aware of them taking any at any of the neighbours?
No.
Okay. And I understand that I mean, we've had a recent discussion about why you are more concerned now about the noise than you were previously. Could you just explain that to the committee, please?
Yes, John Clare Close is at the north-eastern end of Brackley and is bordered to the north by the Radstone Fields housing development and to the east by the Brackley Sawmills housing development. 51 John Clare Close is currently one of the nearest houses in Brackley to the proposed route and the proposed realignment and elevation of the A43. My concern is the environmental impact of these works, in particular with regard to the increase and transmission of noise from the A43. We have recently been made acutely aware of the current noise generated by traffic on the A43 along our eastern boundary. We were protected by a substantial hedge comprising of mature hawthorn trees and other mature foliage, which has now been uprooted by the developer of the sawmill site as part of their planned site clearance activities, thus exposing us to a significant reduction in attenuation. One of the many environmental consequences of this was to raise our awareness to the traffic noise levels from the A43, which is particularly perceptible early morning and in the evening. South Northants Council has subsequently confirmed in correspondence to us that the developer will replant a hedge sometime in the future. However, such mitigation will not become effective for at least 10 years, until such time as that hedge has matured. So my concern is that when the A43 is elevated and realigned, all existing attenuation along the western edge of the current route will be lost. As we've heard, movements will subsequently increase day and night as a result of HS2 construction works, servicing a proposed site facility at Islets Farm, and general increase of freight and vehicular traffic not associated with the HS2 construction period. All of this poses a significant threat to my living environment. My concern is that appropriate mitigation measures should be applied timely, not just for John Clare Close, but for the current housing developments adjacent to us. Hitherto, there's been no attempt by HS2 to measure survey noise levels at my property, despite provisions made by them. I would ask, as a concerned member of the public, how effective impact assessments and appropriate mitigation measures be implemented without this basic information.
Peter, would you be happy for HS2 to come to your property now and take those measures?
I have no objection whatsoever.
Okay, that's lovely, thank you.
Do you have any questions, Mr. Mould?
Yes, a couple, thanks. Mr. Baker. Breaker. I'm sorry, it's the name badge it's got it wrong. Your property, as you pointed out to us helpfully on the slide in front of you, is one that is going to be presently. I think it's facing open land, isn't it? But over the coming years, as I think you've said, development is going to take place, isn't it, to the north and east of your property? And we get a sense of that if we go on to one of your later slides, A84713. If I can just your property. If you just look at the slide in front of you on the screen, do you see that?
Yeah.
I'm going to put the cursor on your property, and we can see that the areas that are coloured to the north and to the east, those are all areas that are subject to development, aren't they?
Eventually, yes.
Yes.
Well, Witness answer.
Sorry.
Yeah. And I understand it. That's going to be a mixture of housing development and also other development, mixed-use development, as it's called. So housing and commercial development as well.
No.
What is it going to be?
Housing.
Housing. Thank you. I'm being told it's housing by your colleague. So there's going to be a good deal of there's going to be a lot of building between your property and not only the bypass but also the railway beyond, isn't there? In the future, there's going to be a good deal of building.
There will, yes.
Yes. All right. Thank you. And as I think the committee said, and you may know as well, one of the advantages, one of the few advantages of having open land developed between you and roads and railways is that buildings tend to act as noise barriers. They tend to attenuate noise because noise bounces off the walls of the buildings between you and the road or the railway line, and that tends to limit the amount of noise that you experience in your property.
I wouldn't disagree with that, but
Thank
I'm
you.
concerned about the fact that the A43 will be elevated. And at the moment, we sit quite high at 51 John Cliff Road.
Yeah.
As opposed to the proposed developments to the north. So,
Well, the road will be taken. I think that the purple line that's been drawn by the petitioners here, that's intended to show the line of the rear-lined road, isn't it? And so the elevated section, as you put it, is going to be broad. If you just take the cursor up, it's broadly in this area here. The elevated section is effectively to take the road on a bridge over the railway line, isn't it? You've seen the plans, I take it?
yes.
Yeah. And the railway is going to be in a cutting at this point. Yeah? You know that?
Yes.
So it's taking the road over a railway in cutting. And roads going over railway lines in cuttings are a relatively typical feature of the English landscape, aren't they?
Yes, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah. Okay. The other point I wanted to raise with you is you said that you had agreed very kindly to allow HS2 to come onto your property and to take noise measurements. You won't be surprised to hear that the reason why you're not aware of any noise measurements having been taken is that we didn't actually take any at your property in the end. We haven't hitherto exercised that right. We've used your property as an assessment point, but we based the assessment for that property on a noise measurement point, which is elsewhere in Brackley. And if you would like to see where it is, I can show you that on a plan. It's P4813. You can see your property identified here as assessment 266177. Do you see that?
Yeah.
The actual measurement point that we used is CS2105, which I'm pointing out to you now. So we used the noise survey data that we got from that measurement point as the basis for making an assessment of noise effects on your property, and those assessments. That noise data therefore informs the baseline sound levels and the predicted noise levels that you'll see on P4816. We can just blow that up. There we go. You can see your property, existing, just scroll down, there we are, your property, 266177, John Clare Close. At measurement location, you see, as I pointed out, CS2105. The existing sound levels here, fairly typical for a sort of suburban location, or edge of town location, I should say, probably rather than suburban. 58 in the daytime, 54 in the night time, and then peak noise at 76. And then if we look down to the bottom for the operational noise, the same location point, you can see the railway is predicted to generate noise at 52 in the day, 45 at night, and a peak of 55, 58. And then when we put everything together, including the road noise, we get 59 day, 54 night, and the change is nil. So our prediction is that you will experience
No.
No change. Can you just bear with me? No change as a result of the road. Now, what we have done, and I think this was mentioned a minute ago, we've written to the District Council in response to a point they raised in their petition a week or two ago, just clarifying how the road noise from the new overbridge has been taken into account in the assessment. I expect we're going to come to that later. But I just wanted to run through that with you, Mr. Breaker, as you're here, just to explain to you how we've gone about making a prediction of existing and likely noise from the railway and from the scheme in relation to your property.
I understand, but I'm not a noise expert, but I would have thought that having approached us at the beginning to get a baseline figure, it would have been sensible to measure it rather than predict it.
Well, Mr. Thornley-Taylor, who's spoken to the committee and is an expert, has explained that what we do is we take a view as to where we can derive reliable baseline measured noise data. And although we made arrangements to take measurements at a variety of properties, including your own, we've made a judgment as to whether, in fact, we need to take measurement data from every one of those properties, and where we felt that we can provide a reliable picture of the existing noise without doing so. We've obviously we've not, but we may, in due course, we may come back and we may ask you if we can come on. All right. Okay.
Thank you, Peter.
I'd just like to say that obviously they paid to do a measurement at a point. That point's been used in correspondence as reference, and no measurements were actually made there. Taking a measurement, the reference point that Mr. Mole pointed out was the other side of the A43, having done extensive noise measurements to peak times, night times and everything else. There is a difference between those two locations, between what they presented. Obviously local levels and the profile of the land does have an effect, so how you can necessarily substitute the point is something that we could argue about, but it's going to waste the committee's time. At the end of the day, the evidence is they've said they've taken measurements at a point, they haven't done that, so there we have some doubts about some of the information we get fed. We leave it at that.
I think we have heard before, I think the project asked several people in certain areas, and they don't use all of them.
But they've referenced it.
We were just concerned that they were using that for a proxy for another
site.
site.
No, good point.
When
It's the second proxy in the same location.
Anyway, let's crack on.
Yeah. If we could just go to slide 10, please. This is to... You'll find it. No, that's it. This is to, again, taken from the point that we stood and shows the location of the realigned A43 and where the main construction compound will be, which is the very large red block, which will sit right on the top of the hill. So from the town it's going to be clearly visible for 6 years, we're told. Slide 11, please. This is taken in the cutting on the A43. The top one shows a lorry currently travelling through that cutting. I think that most HGVs are approximately 5 metres high, so I think that's a fair level of being able to say that the railway will sit at the top of that embankment. The one below shows what it would be if the additional 3 metres, which is allowed under the limits of deviation, were to be put into effect. So as you can see, the road is going to be considerably higher than it currently is, and it's also going to be considerably more exposed.
So can I ask, Mr. Mould, limit of deviation, does that mean 3 metres up or 3 metres down?
Yes, effectively it does.
So most petitioners presume 3 metres up, but the reality is it could be lower.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And we've explained why we have it.
Yeah.
But in the petition response, the indication was that it was more likely to be 3 metres higher than lower.
Mr. Miller actually reminds me that going lower, it's unlimited. The 3 metres limit is going up. I mean, you can go down as far as you like.
But it gets more expensive.
All right.
Yeah.
We understand from Northamptonshire County Council that the Highways Agency is satisfied with the proposed gradient to get from the roundabout to the top of that hill. We've not seen any indication that was just a conversation. But we're not sure that the gradient, if you have to go an additional 3 metres, is still going to be acceptable, given that that road takes a considerable number of HGVs on a daily basis. And I'm sure that would affect the noise. Anybody who's lived next to a road where HGVs go slowly up a hill will know that they generate significant noise in that particular mode. We would hope for an assurance that the general noise levels from the traffic post-construction will be no higher than pre-construction, irrespective of the operational noise. That's not what we're looking at, it's specifically the road noise. We have some readings of our own, but we don't claim to be professional. We've also looked at peak levels rather than averaging, as we believe that those peaks would disturb people's quiet enjoyment of their environment. If I could go to number 12. My apologies for rotating this. I've rotated it left to try and get all the developments in. And this is really just to demonstrate where all the new development is. You can see the line is in the top left-hand corner of your screen. Pretty colours across there. And the reason that I've coloured these areas differently is actually those are 8 different developers. And at the moment, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those sites are being worked. A 6th will come on stream next month, all generating their own traffic. If I can just take the next slide. You can see on there on the right-hand side, I've attempted to show the realignment of the A43. If you drop down to the roundabout, which is where we stood, just below that you can see a red dot. That's a new roundabout that's going to be constructed, and that purple line across to the back of Mr Breaker's property and beyond is actually the new construction route for those developments on the north side of the town. So all the traffic from those sites will come to that roundabout and onto the A43. Each of those developers have been required to carry out transport assessments to look at obviously, they're all required to do it, it's part of the planning process. But these developments are going to deliver 2,000 new homes, a supermarket, hotel, a health facility and a residential care home. It's going to increase the town's population by approximately 40%, and that's over the time frame of HS2. So we're going to see a significant increase in traffic on the A43 anyway, which is why the developers have had to do their transport assessments. The developers for Radston Fields, which on there are shown the purple at the top and the paler one next to it, the developers for those particular sites, as part of their transport assessments, had to look at all the roundabouts on the A43, and I've got the figures that they've got. They've done it to Highways Agency methodology. As a result of that, they've been asked to do some work on one of the other roundabouts, which Councillor Morell will talk me through later, which is on the Oxford Road. But the other roundabouts, they were told that the disruption far outweighed the benefits, so no improvements will be carried out on the other roundabouts. This particular one, obviously there's an opportunity here with this one, as the elevation is changing, to be able to reconfigure that, and hopefully at that point the Highways Agency will take into account the increased traffic. And I'm going to hand over to Mark now.
Thank you. I'm Mark Morell, Town Council in Brackley. I've been working with Linda Carter on the HS2, looking at how that impacts on the town and local area. Prior to retiring, I had a 25-year quite successful career in the utilities industry, and I've worked on traffic management, structural works, reinstatement, major constructions. Some of the constructions, remember the old Docklands Development Corporation, I did all the design gas work for that, installations. HS1 in central London with St Pancras, and even Crossrail when it first raised its head. So also I've had, since then I've retired, I've become a national campaigner about the state of the UK roads, but we'll pick up about the state of the roads around us later on. I have first-hand experience of HS1, having friends and family down there, and I'm sure a lot of assurances were given at that time, but I think we're down to the level of the real detail that impacts on people's lives. Assurances at high level, great commitments, but having seen the traffic problems and dust and pollution happened actually, that's what our residents are going to face, and that's really what we're trying to bear down and get a seat at whatever table to represent our residents, because we do fall between the stools. We can't rely on, because we are the sort of boundary town, as it were, and it's not only us, it's the other parishes around us that we're trying to support. I'd like to say at the outset that the traffic phase in construction of HS2 is a significant concern of the Town Council residents and neighbouring parishes. and it will affect their normal lives because we will end up with traffic issues and rat runs like general any construction. We see that even with the small amount of development practically currently now. So if we can go to slide 14, please. Really just to point out that Brackley obviously sits on the A43 between the M1 and the M40. It is a major corridor for quite a large amount of heavy goods vehicles travelling to and from the south coast and the docks. And obviously there was an assessment done in 2011 on the A43 showing the tens of thousands of vehicle movements on there. Well, obviously now at 2015 the vehicle movements have increased dramatically. And Brackley is actually encircled by that A43. So if we can go to slide 15, please. A bit heavy, but the potential catastrophic effect on Brackley and the surrounding parishes if there isn't a proper management plan, just not looking at HS2 because we've got all these developments and a further development coming online as a result of RAF Croughton that's over the same period. Everything's being concentrated, and unless all parties, that doesn't obviously includes HS2 and other interested bodies, do an in-depth management plan about the knock-on effect. If they're dealt in isolation, it could be catastrophic for our town. The roads around our town, when we do have a small incident on the A43, they should use A roads, but we know we've had the town blocked and gridlocked. If you look at those roundabouts that are actually put out there, where our concern is obviously the traffic disruption. People actually, a lot of people work in Brackley. They actually travel out. They'll go to stations around us because there's a station in Brackley to and from their daily work, shopping to places like Milton Keynes and Northampton, and actually getting out onto the A43 as a result of the increased traffic and problems there. Obviously, close to us, we have the Silverstone internationally well-renowned race circuit, and obviously brings a lot of revenue into the town and local area. We're concerned about the impacts of any works that would affect that and people coming and staying away from those and the predicted growth of traffic that has an impact on that. I think that's fine. I'll move on to the next slide, please. We've got statements, as I'm not going to read the slide out, we've got statements that came out, we've referenced that in terms of major adverse impact of virtually on all of the junctions and roundabouts from the M40 right the way through to the compound area. And obviously we've taken the words from HS2 of what they say are major adverse effects and delays. So we've petitioned on that basis from their information and knowing the local area as much as we do and what happens. We go to the next slide. But then we got from the petitioner's response that obviously that assessment seems to have changed somewhat with the words of traffic flows increases and the word of relatively low, considering results and no mitigation. So we're a bit concerned in terms of, on the original document, it told us about significant major adverse effects at those locations. So then we're told it's not major adverse effects. So we were concerned about which is the true level on that basis. And obviously we've picked up on there about there is no mention about liaison with local councils because I think Linda mentioned that earlier, that we tend to fall away from that, and it's our residents that are really going to suffer day to day. If we move on to the next slide, please. We've got some peak hour figures that come from HS2. We've got some red rings around there to show increases at peak hours of, significantly, 1,282 movements, 932 movements. I don't really want to bore the committee again into the detail of movements because we can argue over one lorry here, one lorry there. It's the general principle about one minute we're getting high levels at peaks, then the next information we get is it normalised. The peak's going to be most people are going to want to exit and egress into Brackley and the surrounding area, so they're significant to us at that particular point because that's the people sitting in the queue for 15-20 minutes to come out onto the A43 is going to be relevant to them at that particular time of the morning or evening. So we move on to the next slide, please. That just gives you the evening peaks as well. But we noticed that the slide information as figure referenced gives us baseline figures of 2021. However, in the CSA document, when you actually look at the Gantt chart on there, most of the construction site for the other satellite compounds would have ceased. So it's only the main compound of 2021, from our understanding, would be operational. So if you're giving baseline figures of 2021, what happens between 2017 and 2021 on vehicle movements? When the Gantt chart clearly shows a stop at the end of 2020. So if you've got satellite compounds and the movements going on, what figures are correct? We move on to the next slide, please. That's just a zoom in. The BP roundabout or everyone calls it BP roundabout, but it's the Northampton Road roundabout, is the top larger roundabout closest, thank you very much, which we stood on the corner of, and you realise how busy it was even at off-peak times on that basis. Just bear with me while I just check on covered everything. Yeah, if you come down to the next roundabout there, that is a real pinch point. That's if you come from Brackley, it's the Buckingham Road roundabout. If you're coming from Buckingham, it's the Brackley Road roundabout. And then the roundabout further down, thank you very much, everybody calls the Tesco's roundabout, but it's the Oxford roundabout. And then further down, there's a roundabout on the M40 called Evenly. I will talk about those a little bit more in depth because this is where we see significant problems. Can we go to the next slide, please? The first roundabout Linda talked about is where the elevation change of the road is. I'm not going to go over that. This is the next one which we showed, and I've put an indication on their location. That's the one where it goes to Buckingham, coming out of Brackley. There's the A43 going right to left. That was taken at 11 o'clock in the morning, and not peak time. That roundabout is a pinch point because you not only get the volume of traffic along the A43 and the heavy goods movements. Coming from Brackley, where the van's placed, is an industrial estate with Fazenda Foods, which is the second largest chicken processing plant. That delivers 2 million chickens a week. So there's lorry movements in and out there constantly. The other side from Buckingham to Weston, obviously there's a satellite up there that would affect some of that, is Sugar Rich Foods. Now that's the only national provider that actually takes foodstuffs and manufactures those form of foodstuffs into animal feed. There is significant volume of traffic movement, and that has increased since 2011, 2012 and 2013 because it's a growing area. So that roundabout gets heavy goods vehicles, large volumes from all directions. If we can move to the next slide, please. At the narrowest point, that roundabout is 7 metres wide. Now, I've done an indication there to show what happens when a heavy goods vehicle goes round that corner. Very little people try to actually go between there because obviously you take your life in hand as they swing off that circuit. So that's going to be a major problem with all the traffic that are currently going on the A43, plus the current businesses, with the impact of the vehicle movements between the satellites and the main compound. For the roundabout at the where we stood is on the BP garage at the Oxford Road is 9.5 metres. So at 7 metres with that pinch point, you can see the actual problem. We can move on to the next slide, please. This just gives you a quick view. The top picture there gives you a view from the slope coming down to the roundabout from to Weston and Buckingham, which obviously the HS2 vehicles from the satellite compounds will come down to. Some work needs to be done to expose that because it's dangerous at the best of times. On the right-hand side, you've got the view coming up from the roundabout showing the incline. As I said, these were taken off peak because they wouldn't take your life in their hands much more than I needed to. The bottom left-hand corner is the actual condition of the A43 as you approach it, coming up to that roundabout from Northampton. That's been reported to the Highways Agency numerous times, and they've done some patch repairs. Even worse is where I was standing, there's a public footpath crossing there, and the defect there should have been dealt with under the footrace criteria, but we won't get into that. How the actual 43 will stand up to the volume of traffic, considering its current condition, is a deep concern. Sorry?
Have you had a meeting with the Highways Agency to discuss that?
It's been reported to them a number of times, photographs, they've done an odd patch.
And certainly my experience of truck roads in my own constituency is that the Highways Agency will work quite closely with the Highways Authority, the County Council Highways Authority. And sometimes the latter will push them quite hard if there's a problem.
They will work with the Highways Authority, but they won't talk to us. They'll work with Northamptonshire County. But again, this particular road forms the boundary between Northamptonshire and Buckinghamshire.
But that is on the county boundary, is it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I take your point, and I don't want to get into the other side of what I do, because getting the Highways Agency and authorities to do what they're supposed to do under the Highways Act. I don't want to get into in this room.
If you look on the picture to your right, can you see there's a green sign there? It's gone out of focus slightly, but that green sign is actually the county boundary.
Mm-hmm.
That one says "Welcome to Buckinghamshire."
Is the road magically improved on the other side of the
No,
sign?
it gets worse.
Ah.
I travel that road every day on my way to work. I can assure you that roundabout, as you come down in that top right-hand corner, you take your life in your hands getting onto that roundabout, because the traffic on the A43 is just constant, and they don't slow down for the roundabout, they just come across, and you can't actually see the traffic until you're 5 metres
Of course,
from
when
the
they
line.
build a new road, then that'll solve that problem.
No, this is the next roundabout. They're not planning a new
Oh,
section here, unfortunately.
As I said, I don't really want to get into that because we've had, it's a constant issue that I have to battle in posting videos up on YouTube, the state of the roads, but as I said, I don't want to digress. It just gives you an impact on that. So if we move to the next slide, please. The next slide is the Oxford Road roundabout. That's coming out from Brackley. Everybody calls it the Tesco's roundabout. To the left, you've got the A43 going up to Northampton. In the top right, you can see the M40 Oxford. That comes from junction 10. And to the right is the A422 that goes to Banbury. There are some issues with that roundabout, generally the overgrowth. There are some works going to be done as a part of that 106 agreement, I believe, by the developers. But that just gives you that sort of last roundabout and the feel for things. We move on to, can we jump to slide 27, because evenly couldn't attend, so I'm going to pick up. This roundabout, again, it's locally known as the invisible roundabout or the flyover, as you can see. In fact, last week we had a red car on top there as well. That's about 8 metres wide, and that's going to have significant movement on there. And it is an issue currently, as you can see. In fact, the roundabout, either corners with heavy goods vehicles going over, they're destroying the curbs. They've put in some concrete to try and protect that, but that's breaking the haunchings. So currently it's not even fit for purpose, and now we're going to expect the impact of heavy goods vehicles that are coming along there from the developers as well as HS2, because it's not just that basis. We're trying to look at its entirety rather than just HS2. And our concern for Evenly is that we do, obviously, heavy goods vehicles going off through Evenly, some sort of signage to protect them. We accept that small vehicles you can't stop, but heavy goods vehicles from that village off of that roundabout. And a number of these roundabouts need to be looked at. They're not fit for purpose currently because of those bases. So can we jump back to slide 25, please? Right. That's just to give you, looking at Brackley itself, if you come to the south of Brackley, going off to the left-hand side, you'll see that's the A422 that goes up to Junction 11 and Banbury, goes through Farvinghoe. That is a diversionary route if something happens on the A43, as we've confirmed with the County Council highways. If you come down south of Brackley to the right, there's the A421. If you come down a bit further with the cursor, come down a little bit more.
To the next
That's it. That's the A421, which is another diversionary route. Because we're ring-locked at that point, if something happens on the A43 around Brackley, there's very limited scope for diversion, because obviously they're the only other roads around us and there's nothing to the north of us. Will send traffic off in all sorts of issues. And as I mentioned, where that roundabout is, that we just, the last one, off of there, if you go up there, there's the RF Croughton, which is going to be a large-scale development for the US United States Air Force over that period of time as well. So the A43 is going to get bombarded everywhere. So I think I've covered everything.
Is suggesting that those two roundabouts, the one, the Evenly roundabout and the A421 roundabout, should have light controls as well as being roundabouts.
That would make real sense. I'm not sure the Evenly roundabout, certainly at the moment, I think the Highways Agency would say to you it's not big enough to have to be light controlled, but I think it would certainly benefit from it. But for those of you that don't know the area, that roundabout where we just said about the 421, if you go just diagonally down and to your left, that area there is RAF Croughton. The US Air Force, I think it's 421 Squadron, I'm not sure exactly. But that's the intelligence unit, there's the listening station there, and they're closing 2 of their bases in East Anglia and bringing all the staff over to Croughton. We only found out about that in January, so I'm sure HS2 probably haven't caught up with it either. But their building work has just started and is due to finish in 2021. It runs perfectly, creates the perfect storm with HS2. They're spending £300 million £300 million on building works on the site.
So we'll have to take it into account
We-
in developing our traffic plans.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, traffic control and that, it's the detail. As I said, I don't think it's for the committee to get bogged down, but there's significant pinch points around there that we can't deal with in isolation. We've got to deal with HS2 plus everything else that's going around us because it affects our residents. Traffic control, currently that's the A43 runs at 70 miles an hour. Further up it's reduced in speed. Whether there's going to have to be speed reductions in the track, it needs a proper investigation, not things picking on isolation, and that's really why we've sort of presented it on that basis. And obviously the concerns. We're concerned about the rat runs because we know that local people will avoid it, and obviously the roads in our area, like somewhat in our county and neighbouring counties, are particularly not in good condition as they now, and they've got to substantiate far high levels of increased traffic generally. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Farthing hose off the A422, which is the one that runs just south of Brackley, which is a diversionary route, takes through to junction 11, the M40, and also through to Banbury. That picture was taken at peak time. There is a tight bend there. The actual wall to the premises, the garden wall has been knocked down so many times, they put reinforcing there. The telegraph pole has been damaged. It is a real pinch point. I mean, why there hasn't been a bypass in the past, I'm not sure. But our concern is obviously it's been a diversionary route, so that happens on A43. It's going to take increased traffic from local people as well as heavy goods vehicles. And as you can see in the centre one, there's already a narrow sign on that basis. So it is a potential problem that will impact generally because a lot of people work in Banbury and go to Banbury to the station to work. We'll go to yeah. And we go to, I think that's it, I think I finished now. I mean, the only thing I was going to say is that in isolation, HS2 would have some effect, but with everything else that's happening in our area, we have some great concerns. And if we represented as a town council and have our input and allow various agencies, the Highways Agency, Northamptonshire County Council, Buckinghamshire County Council, have their input in isolation with how it affects our residents, our residents are going to suffer, and the parishes around us. It is a plea from them as well, from people like Redstone and Hulse, because they have an effect in terms of what their perception is, and even to Western. So collectively, we realise, because we're at the extremities, it's about us having the power and have the place there to get involved in those details. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Slide 28, I think this one speaks for itself. We quite like a station at Brackley. We're halfway between London and Birmingham, and we think there's a real benefit to it. And particularly given that the A43 was upgraded to connect to the M40 and M1 to serve Silverstone, we think that Brackley-Silverstone Parkway would do that just as well. We understand that HS2 have done some cost-benefit analysis. They've told us that in our petition document. We're not quite sure what costs and what benefits they looked at. But we think that since the emphasis has moved away from the really high speeds that were originally anticipated and now to one of capacity, that additional capacity that this station could add in terms of relieving the other overcrowded services in the benefit have got a real benefit to HS2, not to mention the kudos of a high-speed link to a high-speed motor racing circuit. We are in Motor Racing Valley. That's where we are. But we do think that it actually gives a real opportunity there, and I would hate to think that in years to come we sat back and looked at it and said, I wish we'd put a station there. So the last slide, you have there the solutions to meet our petitioning needs. We want an assurance regarding the levels of noise from the elevated A43 and measurements on committed and the proposed sites. We appreciate the fact that many of the sites that are currently being developed were not in the original list of committed sites. However, some of those that were appear to have disappeared from some of the documents. We'd like the traffic figures amended to take account of all the developments, including Croughton. I'm aware that Croughton has only just recently published its plans, but it is going to have a major impact on that area, and I think you need to take it in its entirety rather than just looking at one particular issue. We'd like the Highways Agency to do a full survey of the A43, looking at those issues relating to traffic volumes. I appreciate we're here talking to HS2, but we're all aware that the Highways Agency must be working very closely with this project, being also part of the Department for Transport, and obviously can't petition on any issues.
And you're counting on that? And you're counting on that?
I'm hoping.
No,
I'm
I'm not
hoping.
counting on anything. I think we've got to defend our own corner for our residents, and we deal with it on that basis. And we've actually requested information from HS2 of their any discussions they've had with the highways agencies, but they've treated it as a freedom of information request, so we're waiting for that result.
Yeah, haven't got that information as yet. We'd like an assurance of inclusion in all the local environmental management plans discussion, including the highways ones. When our residents have issues, their first port of call is the town council, and they expect me to know. It would be really nice if I did know. One of the things that we mentioned in our petition, we understand the 51 group may have taken it up, but I'm not sure. We asked that environmental health officers be employed by all the district councils along the line, independent of HS2 and responsible for monitoring the noise, but we suggested that those costs should be met by HS2. It's all very well saying that the nominated undertaker will talk to us, they'll do this, they'll do that. They're not independent, and our residents will not see them as such. They will expect to have somebody independent being able to assure them that what is being done is the best that can be achieved. We'd like to have regular liaison meetings as detailed in information E13 to include Brackley Town Council. And we'd like assurance that maintaining access and egress from Brackley will be the priority during construction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mole.
In the space of, I hope, no more than 10 minutes, I need to just deal with one or two points myself and then ask Mr. Smart to speak to you about one slide, if I may.
Okay. So,
running down the list, in relation to levels of noise from the elevated A43, can we put up, please, P4892, a letter which was sent to the South Northamptonshire Council on the 11th of February, following their appearance in committee. And if we can go to the second page, the table that you see in front of you, the line revised assessment was an assessment that we sent to the District Council, which shows our revised assessment on the basis of the committed development, that is to say the new development to the north and east of Brackley, and the predicted impact of the scheme, including the road, upon that development. And as you can see, the change that we're predicting is 1 decibel during the day, nil at night. Mr. Thornley-Taylor told you that 1 decibel is not perceptible to the human ear, and therefore I can say that on current predictions we are predicting that the traffic noise to the north and east of Brackley, including the new development, is not likely to be materially higher than traffic noise from the road now. If we can go back to the petitioner's slide, a second point, I will deal with the second two bullets with Mr. Smart. The assurance on inclusion in all LEMP discussions, including highways. Can we please put up paragraph 4.2.2 of the Code of Construction Practice? The nominated undertaker and or its contractors will engage with the local communities, local authorities and other stakeholders in order to develop the local environmental management plans. Local and communities means Brackley Town Council, and I can say that we have already accommodated the development of Brackley that you've heard about through the route alignment for the railway to the east of the town. We will bring the Town Council into the development of the local environmental management plan which serves Brackley. And if I take you to the template at Annex 3, just to see what that engagement will include, just to the next page, please. Next one after that. Traffic and transport, local proposals for the management of construction traffic, including any required alterations to local roads, proposed access routes for site traffic, and for all heavy vehicle movements. These will also be subject to relevant third-party consents and notifications. So those are matters that will fall within the scope of engagement with, in this case, amongst others, Brackley Town Council through the development of the local environmental management plan process.
So we have the assurance that we will be involved in that.
You do.
Thank
If
you.
we can go back to the asks, please. The Environmental Health Officer has a series of statutory responsibilities in relation to noise, working hours, other environmental controls, which are either provided for within or outside the bill under the Control of Pollution Act, and we've made clear that it's under service level agreements that we are going to negotiate with responsible local authorities. The costs of defraying those statutory responsibilities will be met by essentially by the promoter. The minutes of the planning forum, and I think of interest to the Brackley Town Council, of the highway forum that we have mentioned to you, which is a group of a liaison group with local highway authorities. Those minutes are published on the website, and they will continue to be published on the website so that the Town Council can see those as and when the meetings take place. I can't give an assurance that maintaining access and egress from Brackley will be the priority during construction, because we have to give appropriate priority to getting on with building the railway as speedily as we can, but I can say that will be a priority, and the way in which the Town Council can seek to, as you say, fight your corner is through engagement in the local environmental management plan process. Can I then call Mr Smart into the box, please, briefly to speak to slide P4809. I should say while he's doing it that we do not presently propose to change the bill by including a station at Brackley, I'm afraid. We don't think that that the interests of the railway will be furthered by that, and the public interested in.
The committee are a bit shocked by that revelation.
Well, I'm sorry about that, and I'll just have to take your.
We understand that as part of discussions yesterday, HS2 have been asked to look at reverting to the original line, which was between Radston and Brackley, which would bring the line closer. Hopefully, if that happens, we will have an opportunity for further petitioning and discussion.
If the line is moved, the answer is yes, because if the line is moved beyond its existing limits to the west at Radston, it will undoubtedly require an amendment or an additional provision for that purpose, and you will have lockers in relation to that. Thank you. But I am sure that if there is a proposal to do that, I can tell you now that that will not be the first time that you will hear about it.
I'd just like to one. It's all very well and good having access to minutes. I don't think we just want access to minutes about the highways issues. We want to be involved actively in those meetings, because we bring a lot more local knowledge than people doing desktop surveys, assessments from offices that are nowhere near the actual facility.
Well, if we included every town and parish council and parish meeting in the highways group that I talked about, it would be completely unmanageable, I'm afraid. So we have to limit that to the statutory highway authorities. But as I say, the minutes will be published, and there is, of course, local community level councils such as your own. There is nothing at all to stop you from engaging with your local highway authority and ask them to raise matters at that meeting if you would wish them to do so.
We only found out yesterday who our representative is.
Right. Well, that's a matter between you and Oxfordshire County Council.
Northamptonshire
County Council, I should say. Mr Smart, can we just briefly see that the numbers here are the product of the continuing work which we have been doing since the publication of the environmental statement. I think the key numbers here are K and L, B and A, and we lost them.
They are the key numbers.
And just tell the committee in 2 minutes, please, what's going on.
Right, well, as you can see what looks rather like the back of a stegosaurus. That is Toe Western cutting. It's a very long cutting. It's about 2 kilometres long, average of 20 metres deep. And the material that we are excavating from there is good material, limestone material, so we would like to use as much of that in the works as we can. But nevertheless, I think, as the committee has heard before, under the mass hall where we are doing our bulk earthworks, we move along the trace and we take material off at the roads that seem to be best suited to do so, bearing in mind various blockers down the route and how far we can move it along the trace. We've identified the A42 and then the A43 as the best way of moving material from this, what we call roadhead. The roadhead is the point at which we move material off the trace onto the highway network. They are A roads, and this is the way that we will do it. Although the peak levels are shown in the numbers on the right-hand side. Those peak levels are not for the whole of the phasing. So from the first be January 2019 to April 2020, we were more like 800 to 900 HGV movements, and not as high as we have there. Those figures will be the peak, which is April 2020 through to October 2020, and then we drop down again to about 600 to 700. It is a substantial amount of HGVs on the road, but we believe that's an acceptable level. We've assessed it. We're not suggesting that there's no impact. That's not what we're saying. Of course, it won't be as it is at the moment, but we believe it is acceptable. And of course, as the committee knows, as we get nearer to the implementation of the project and construction, we will be working with the local highway authorities to look at the junctions and the impacts we'll have, and we'll carry out further assessments to see if any further mitigation measures are required.
And those numbers, which the committee has on the slide, if we can just get A and B, there we go. What those numbers show is that the key movement, as you've just said, is in and out of the roadhead, just at the point that I'm indicating here, on the A422, and then southwards, southwestwards,
and down
to the M40.
Yeah.
And so traffic on the going the other way, as we can see from C and D, the numbers are very considerably lower.
That's correct.
Yeah. So that's the key heavy movement of traffic, and that's where the focus of traffic management is going to be. And as we've seen, that will involve, amongst other things, the town council through the local environment management plan mechanism.
This is one of these areas where you have the difficulty, because where you're showing A and B, the 422 Brackley Road, that's actually in Buckinghamshire. So, you know, again, we're cross-county. But also, what that does demonstrate with a 700, I think that's a 791% increase in HGV traffic. That's the top figure.
I would just make the point, Scott, you're meant to allow the promoters to cross-examine their witness, then you get the opportunity.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I'll keep quiet.
It's helpful. I'm prompted by that, Mr. Smart. We can see the percentage increases, but the actual numbers,
yes,
are I think we've said in the past, are what really matter, aren't they?
That's right. I mean, in the peak, I mean, what it does show is that there's a fairly low level of HGVs on the road at the moment, and we increase that substantially, which is why you get those big percentage increases. So we've got an increase of, in the peak hour, of 3 HGVs that roughly exist to something like 90. But as I've already said, that isn't acceptable to the road. A roads like this commonly take 2,400 vehicles per hour. Now, so, you know, we're not saying there's no effect, but as I said, we believe it to be acceptable, and we'll be liaising with the highway authorities and under the local communities to look at any other mitigation as we close in on construction, which I'm now repeating myself, so I will let Mr. Mould ask me any other questions.
Mr. Mould has no further questions.
Mrs. Carr?
Really, it was just to emphasise the fact that the numbers on that road, I accept that some A roads take considerably more traffic than that. I wouldn't argue with that. I would ask whether the gentleman has actually visited the area. But equally, where that road meets the A43 is the pinch point that we emphasise. The roundabout is not small, is not large enough to take currently two HGVs around. It struggles to take an HGV and a car going parallel around it. And with this increase, and you've got traffic what will happen is the lorries coming from the A43 have to turn right there. That will just stop the rest of the traffic on the road there.
So there normally would be detailed discussions between the county council and the promoters, and it may be with everything that's going on in your area that the roundabout might need improving and increasing in size, and clearly that might be one of the advantages of having a lot of lorry movements for a short period of time, but once they go, you have a better road system.
But those figures are daily traffic flows, not peaks that you've shown us on that table. On the table, It's across the side that says
On
daily.
that table there,
Yeah,
daily,
yeah. And the previous ones it showed us peak, and it's peak that we're concerned with because obviously
Yeah, in the S it shows the peak, which
yes,
is the 3
which
to the 90.
obviously shows significant difference in peak for that period of time. Does it take into account around sugar-rich foods because there's been a tremendous ramp-up and use of that facility over the last couple of years? And also, in your figures, you've got 741 vehicle movements daily coming from the Oxford Road roundabout coming up, 730 going up the Brackley Road and 24 going on to the main compound. Well, they don't add up.
Well,
That's 741 movements, and you've had the others up. It's 700. I think it's 13 missing. As I do want to get into the detail of it. It's like doing assessments of noise away from the actual points where you're taking them.
well, it just depends on, because we've got a combination of construction and mass haul, so it depends on quite where vehicles are going. But coming back to the point, I'm not aware that the highway authorities have raised specific concerns on these junctions. We know that there is going to be some impact. We've highlighted that in the ES, and as you said, sir, as we go forward, we'll be looking at whether any further mitigation is required.
Okay. Any final questions from Brackley Town Council? Okay. Final brief comments. Would you like to make some final brief comments?
I accept that Mr Knoll pointed out that you can't engage with every parish all the time, and I fully accept that obviously that would become a very difficult situation. But having explained the background of the particular circumstances in and around Brackley, I think we are a special case. Although you know you don't like special cases, having been there myself, I think that needs to be looked at afresh because we've got a lot to add and we do fall between a number of counties. And whether the county council have got our true interests at heart for our residents rather than pure traffic situation, we would like that input. So I'd like that really considered that if we're prepared to actually put some time and commitment to get involved and be involved in anything to do with the A43 and the corridor, please could we do so.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
We now move on to Search Aid Limited, which is Mr. Rukin. So, Search Aid. Search Aid? Search Aid.
Search Aid.
So, wait. Good morning, Mr. Rukin.
Yeah, it's still morning.
Just there.
Right. Okay, well, today's petitioner is Search Aid Limited. They are a business which provides the searches for people when they're selling houses. And as a result, they do a lot of travelling around the Brackley area. As has been pointed out, it's on the confluence of 3 different counties. And the basis of the business is going to council offices where information is stored about the various bits of information that you need for the searches when buying and selling houses, and get those. And as a result, the main concern of this petition is, not trying to repeat what Councillor Moran's just said, but it's mostly about access and traffic management. As basically they're a business that spends a lot of time roaming around the 3 counties around Brackley. There are, as you've seen already, there are 4 main roads. In fact, we'll go on to my first slide if we can, please. Please, so I can have it the right way up. Thank you very much. So there's 4 main roads around Brackley, and what we've seen from the figures is that there's going to be, 3 are going to be subject to major works, and there's going to be they've said 850 to 14,000 two-way trips for 17 months, with a total of between 1,700 and 2,860 extra HGV movements per day on these roads. That's to move 9 million tonnes of material from the two major construction compounds around Brackley. And again, as Councillor Morell has pointed out, the traffic flows that we've seen for 2021 actually are for a year after which some of the work is due to have finished, so they can't possibly indicate the peak flows, because the Gantt chart shows that one of the construction compounds will have closed at that point. As you can see, if we can move to the next slide, I'll just show you around the roads. This is the A43, going north into Brackley. And the next one, please, is again the 34. And the road that we've just been talking about, if we go on to this is the 422, and finally the 422 on the roundabout approach to Brackley. Now, this is a road that we've just been talking about with Mr. Smart, and it would say it's potentially unsuitable for the levels of traffic that are going to be put on it, and specifically access and egress at the roundabout, which you can see at the end. The traffic, the photos of the traffic aren't as busy as they could have been because they were taken at half term and they weren't taken in the peak period. But there is regular congestion here in the peak period, and where the roundabout meets the A43. Now, what we've seen, if we can go on to the next slide, sorry, the one after that. These are the excerpts from the environmental statement, again, as Councillor Morell has been talking about, which show the percentage, well, the increases in traffic on, specifically at the top, the A422. Now, is that you? No, that's it. Sorry. Specifically on the A442, where you can see a 1,282% increase in HGVs in the morning peak, and if we go to the PM peak, the next slide please, a 3,421% increase on the eastbound, and again over 2,500% increase in the PM peak. Now, Mr. Smart said that those figures are so high because there aren't many HGVs on that road at the moment at all. And the idea that there's like between, I think it was 7 to 10 in the morning in the PM, in the AM peak, and 3 to 4 in the PM peak, we find, to be perfectly honest, a bit ludicrous. It isn't the main route for lorries in the area. Obviously, the A43 is, but the idea that there's 3 to 4 lorries in the morning, in the afternoon, is just daft. The other thing that's very odd, and this is something I meant to raise with one of the other petitioners, is looking at these survey times. HS2, throughout the environmental statement, refer to the AM peak and the PM peak. There is no definition of what the AM peak and the PM peak is in any of the documents. There was one definition of the AM peak which contradicted itself in a table, and there's no definition anywhere of what the PM peak actually refers to as far as we've been able to ascertain. Now, Mr. Smart referred to, actually the document I've got is from the roads was slightly different. If we can go to P4846, please. It's more or less the same one that you've just had on, but it goes slightly to the east as well. Now, as you can see from these figures, HS2 Limited have done very recurring, what has been a recurring theme, and come up with new traffic figures, again, that seem to be based on the 2012 surveys, just before petitions happen. Now, it's not A and B on these ones, but it's the same figures, I hope. I couldn't really see them when I was sat down on the screen. But G and H, where you'll see that the percentage increases have come down significantly to between 7 and 800%. Now, we don't quite understand how that's happened, because it seems to be that what's happened is HS2 have decided that there are now more lorries on the roads than there previously were in 2012, so therefore the percentage increase has come down. And we're not certain how the percentage increase can come down, because this figure, these figures here, are based on the daily average where the figures I've shown you previously in the environmental statement were based on the peaks, and it would stand to reason that the roads are at their busiest period, at their busiest, during the peaks. So if you go from having a peak figure to having a daily figure, then surely the percentage increase in the daily figure would actually go up, because you're not taking it across the peak where it's the busiest time. Basically, what we're saying is, again, we don't have a great deal of faith in the traffic figures, and it seems that new figures have come up which, again, don't make a great deal of sense. But it is rather a lot of traffic. And basically, if we can go back to my very first slide, well, not the cover page, brackets 2, this is the problem, that because of the material that's being excavated, you can see with that red line, every single truck is going to the M40. As we've covered in previous petitions, what happens when they get to major roads is then a mystery where the spoil goes. But if there is material that's being excavated for use in construction somewhere else on the line, it would make a great deal of sense to us if it was driven up and down the line instead of on the road network, because it's just, if that's truly what's happening, if it's extraction of material that's going to be used in construction, use the trace, because that's, for years, and Brackley is not alone in this respect, but for years when we've asked about the construction impacts of traffic with HS2, where up and down the line, we were told we won't really use the roads, we will use the trace of HS2. And in this instance, where you're specifically talking about material that's being excavated for use in construction, opposed to spoil that's going somewhere, it seems inherently sensible that you use the trace to transport it, because that is in fact where it is going. You're keeping the traffic off the roads, you're getting it to wherever it's going, maybe not quicker, but definitely over a shorter distance. So it seems rather odd that the roads are being used at all in this instance. Right. Yeah, and to be honest, there isn't... Sorry, to be honest, there isn't a lot more in respect to this petition that's non-standard stuff that we haven't heard before. Again, I've been asked to raise the point of the Code of Construction Practice in the issue of enforcement, and again, it seems that if we're really happy that the draft Code of Construction Practice will actually be the absolute Bible of construction, then we, again, simply do not understand the reticence of HS2 Limited to have it incorporated in the bill, and therefore it's binding, and maybe have someone independent to make sure that there's enforcement in place. In terms of the travel planning, there was a response from the promoter on slide... I have lost it. No. There we are. Sorry, I thought it was before the travel. On 4848. Oh, sorry, 4847. A specific point was made about construction travel plans, and again, it's yes and no, in that HS2 Limited the promoter seemed to have missed the point that was being made by the petitioner, in that we weren't so worried about the travel to work travel plans as so much the lorries, and again, to have this concept that there will be a workforce travel plan which will be in place at a later date, again, sort of undermines the predicted traffic flows for 2021, which quite clearly show the commuting of workers in the peak periods, because there's a lot of cars going, say, eastbound in the morning that should then going westbound in the peak period in the afternoon. So that's just a minor point, that the whole concept of having a workforce travel plan at a further date undermines that, but the whole issue was about the number of lorries that will be going on the roads in peak, and the specific request simply to keep them off the road in morning peak. It's not particularly difficult, and because there are so many lorries in such a congested area as is, it seems ultimately sensible, firstly, to schedule them so that they're not messing up the commuting hours. But also, we really don't understand why, if it's excavation of materials that are being used on another site somewhere else, why the trace hasn't been used, and you can keep them off the roads and potentially save money in that respect as well. That's about it for this petition.
Mr. Rugen, can I ask, how many employees of Search Aid actually are using their cars on a daily basis to get out and around the area in Brackley from the front? Obviously, that business is located in the south end of Brackley.
I believe it's just 2.
Just 2. And it's and do you know how many sort of journeys that they do on a sort of weekly or monthly basis?
No, they're doing it on a daily basis. Basically, it depends where a house is sold in terms of which council office you're going to. But because they're on the border of 3 counties, Northamptonshire, Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire, they're going to various different buildings all the time. And because they're going to the records department, they're all timed appointments. So that's the issue, that they don't want something that's going to significantly add time to journeys.
I don't mind this driving around to council offices, because my experience in that, involved in that, personal experience, and also in my role as in local councils, that information is usually available online. So what is it that's different about what they're doing compared to what my experience searchers have been involved in, where it's all now online and they don't have to actually go to a council office anymore?
I got to be honest, I have not been briefed to that detail.
And also perhaps a letter might be more efficient as well. If it's not online, they might email and ask for information to be sent to them. I'm just puzzled by it. I mean, it's very strange that they haven't to drive to all these council offices. But you say you don't know.
I don't know. I couldn't answer that question, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Ricken. Sir Peter will be sorry to miss you today. He's representing the country at some NATO assembly. Mr. Mole.
I just wanted to show you A8493. Clearly, I'm not going to call Mr. Smart to repeat the evidence that he gave you a minute ago, but if we can just zoom in on the top half of this actually shows you quite graphically why it's not terribly helpful to focus only on the percentage increase. If you look at the top line, we're looking at the assessment in the peak hour for the afternoon of the performance of that link between the A422 and the A43 Brackley bypass that we focused on during the course of today. And actually what you see as you move along the eastbound is you can see that there's a column headed 2021 with HS2 construction traffic. All vehicles 559, of which HGV 93. And then if you see the next column shows you the change, so it picks out the HS2 component of that, with HS2 actual change from 2021 baseline. All vehicles 125, HGVs 90. So we're moving from a total flow of HGVs eastbound of 93 in the afternoon peak, of which 90 are HS2. So 3 to 93 gives you a percentage change of 3,421%. But it's much more sensible, I would suggest, if one's looking at the practical operation of the road, to look at the actual numbers and the degree of change, rather than to focus on the percentage. Some might say that including those enormous percentages in this assessment is actually unhelpful. But I'm afraid that's the way in which these assessments are presented on the conventional methodology. And it's the same with the westbound arm. You can see that we move on HGVs with a total flow with HS2 of 94, of which HS2 alone, the component is 90. So 4 HGVs goes up to 94, and the reason for that is that you're adding in the same number of HS2 lorries, which gives you that figure of 2,514%. The real question in practice is the link able to accommodate those vehicles? Answer yes, because we're still many, many tens of percentage points below the carrying capacity of that road. Is the junction able to accommodate those vehicles? Answer, we think yes. We accept there will be likely to be an increase in queuing at certain times of day, but whether that is acceptable is a matter that we have to discuss with the Highway Authority. We've said that we will expect to involve the Town Council in that through the Lent process, and if the view is taken that in order to serve the interests of all road users and to ensure that the project can be constructed as expeditiously as possible, if there's a need to do signalisation works or to change the to make further changes within that link in order to accommodate construction traffic, then that's something that is up for consideration as the detail of the scheme progresses.
I would say, Mr. Moore, I mean, we actually got out of our bus at the service station at the roundabout, which is the junction of the A43 and the Northampton Road. And I must admit, I was quite impressed at how busy that roundabout was mid-afternoon, with heavy goods vehicles, many of them already.
I agree with you, and I'm not for a minute to be taken to say that this is a potential problem that is confined only to the peak. That is a busy road throughout the day. I've travelled that road myself. I know it. So we know that there is here a need to keep the performance of this road and of the traffic, keep that under very close review and to continue to work. The numbers are not changed. We continue to review these numbers because we're trying to get the numbers down. I'm sure Mr. Rukin's clients would want us to do that. He doesn't want us to keep the numbers at the reasonable worst case that they're presented in the environmental statement. He wants to see us getting them down. And where we can take traffic along the trace, we do so. But these numbers that you've seen from Mr. Smart today reflect our current thinking of the residual materials that we do, even allowing for that which goes along the trace, we do have to take out by road.
How possible is it to reduce the number of HGVs travelling during peak hours by using the logistical management of the stuff going? So, because also it seems to me that I'm thinking of where I live when there's roads get congested. I would have thought 2 more HGV vehicles on a busy road could cause considerable disruption. And we're talking about 90 more. And I know that the percentage figures exaggerates that, but ignoring that completely, just ignoring the percentage, 90 more HGVs in the afternoon or whatever, that's a lot of road taken up that isn't taken up at the moment. And especially one HGV on a roundabout can cause a massive tailback on its own. So I'm a bit surprised that you're taking this so lightly.
No, I'm not taking it lightly at all. I accept that this is a road that will require careful management. And we've made that very clear. But there's a balance to be struck between, if you're talking about limiting the use of the road by HGV traffic at certain times of day, what you're likely to do is to prolong the overall duration of the construction. And that adds a cost, but it also adds the pain. And it prolongs the pain, if you like, as far as there is pain. So it's not that we won't do that. Of course we'll be looking with the Highway Authority to see whether there are certain times of day when we should seek to manage. But that's not something that should be committed to now in isolation. It's something that should be addressed through the good offices of a highway, particularly here of a local highway authority, who have not petitioned this bill on this issue, as I recall. So they must be taken to be content that they can address this through under the auspices of Schedule 16 and through discussion with us. And we will take that point that you make into account, along with other factors that need to be brought into account to make sure we try and get the optimum balance here.
I think to be fair, Mr. Mulder, I mean, I do have some sympathy for the petitioners from Brackley because the geography of the area is kind of unique to them, as it were. It's their particular problem. They live in the middle of really what is an island between the A422 and the A43, and I can understand why the county councils haven't petitioned, because where that particular settlement is, Brackley, is kind of on the junction between a number of different counties, and it kind of only affects each one of them a little bit, but it affects the settlement of Brackley really quite a lot. And therefore, from that perspective, I'm wondering what HS2 can do to mitigate the effects of what HS2 is doing, bearing in mind the kind of perfect storm of other developments taking place in the area, like the expanded housing development, etc., and other road modifications which need to be done. I'm wondering if there's something where HS2 could be saying to the relevant county councils, have you missed a trick here, folks?
Well, that was something that was raised yesterday by Mr. I forgot. Sorry, I keep.
Drummond Hay, was it?
Drummond Hay. That's exactly it. Yeah. And I said that we have got a highways group, which includes as its members local highway authorities. This is a point that's now been raised fairly and squarely in committee. And liaison at these points where administrative boundaries meet, and where there's a highways agency managed road as well in the A43 trunk road. Yeah. That's something that I would have thought is a classic item for consideration through that process.
Can I ask an issue Mr. Rukin raised, which was about the baseline traffic figures from 212 or 213? Is it a fact that one is just updating figures as more information comes through, or have there been changes?
Well, the baseline figures anticipate the development commitments that were known to the project at that time, but obviously as further development comes through, then that will need to be brought into account appropriately, because everybody wants to try and make the roads work as well as they can, whilst these...
In other words, the development north of Brackley increases the traffic anyway, so the percentage increase of HS2 on the top is a small percentage.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I suppose the final point from myself is I actually think that it's in the HS2's interests to conduct some of this work in terms of bringing the different strands together, because if the perfect storm which has been highlighted by Brackley were to come about, it would be more frustrating for HS2 in terms of not being able to move the vehicles that it needs to move.
I agree with you entirely. And so do those behind me.
I can see them nodding.
Yeah. I hope they're nodding affirmatively.
They're nodding and smiling. Okay. Final comments, Mr. Rukin?
No, that's absolutely fine. There was just one tiny point I wanted to raise that came up in the Town Council's petition, whereby it seems again that there's been lots of different noise measurement points, but the place that's been the place that they've decided to take the baseline assessment is again, it's next to a road where the measurements were taken in gardens and other places. Where they've taken the baseline assessment is next to the A43, which is not a surprise at all. And this is one of the things that we've seen throughout. I remember talking about it with Red Lane in Kenilworth, Burton Green, sorry. Well, it used to be in Kenilworth, it got moved. Where, again, they take all these measurements, but the baseline study is always taken by the side of the road, which seems to potentially distort the baseline, how much noise there is to start off with, because obviously I would say that at the side of the dual carriageway is probably a bit noisier than someone's back garden. And there wasn't...
Unless that garden's next to the road.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing was, it made the point about deviation, that people do talk about it potentially going 3 metres up, but not the unlimited amount that it's gone down. But that, as I think potentially the Off-Church and Covington petitions possibly were very specific about, is that every time HS2 seems to be re-evaluated, it seems to go up a bit. And
certainly they worry about this. This is one of their key concerns.
This is something that was part of the Brackley Council petition earlier. Just clearing up the point why people look at it on the pessimistic side and not the optimistic side, because they've got used to it, quite honestly.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Rukin, for your attendance today.
Thank you.
And I think that's all for this morning. Thank you very much. Order. If you could please withdraw from the room so we can clear our thoughts. Thank you.
Committee Room 5, sound. 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 Committee Room 5, sound.